that there is some worry in the country about mailing ballots to vote. And we can talk about, we can say immediately that that's not a worry for Hopkinton, but you explain why it's a worry for, for other places in the country. So
thank you for that. I think that a lot of the kind of widespread concern is around the idea that it increases a risk for fraud. So in some systems where they don't really keep track of if voters are still there and information like that, it's easier to get that. But Massachusetts is the only state in the country that actually has the annual census that keeps track and refreshes and updates our voter lists.
Now, hold on a second. It's the only state that does it yearly, or?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And we use that to make sure that our voter lists stay up to date. And so that's why it's so important to respond to the census, because we make sure that based on your responses that you're in fact still there and still registered to vote at that address. And if for some reason you've moved, then it's a way you can tell us that your address should be changed.
Okay, and then, so that could be a problem with other parts of the country, but not Massachusetts. 351 cities and towns can be assured of an honest and fair election.
Correct. The only issues really around mail-in voting in Massachusetts is being addressed now by the general court, which is that it's an extremely labor-intensive process for municipal clerk's offices at this current time. And so there's some more work being done now to try and increase some of the centralization at the secretary's level before it comes to the clerk's office, making it so that a lot of the additional paperwork and stuff that has to be done is already handled, and we can then just go ahead and actually get the ballots to people and make sure that they're secure.
Well, what kind of paperwork wouldn't you do under the new I just lost the screen. Under the new regulations?
So under the new proposed legislation that's coming out, there's there's a few different proposals on it, but one of them would be that for, especially if we're coming up to the state primary in September, we don't know what the status of coronavirus will be at that time. So one of the plans would be to send applications for mail-in voting to every registered voter. That application will then give the chance for that, if that voter wishes to vote by mail, to simply have a return envelope to send that back to the secretary's office, and then they'll be sent out their ballot for their district, because the secretary prints all the ballots anyway. And so instead of it coming to us and then us mailing the ballot and going through the whole process there, it can be done centrally or through the printer that's contracted by the Secretary of State's office. So then at that point, once it's all done, it'll have a ballot with return postage as well, hopefully, and they will be able to then send it directly to us, where then we can record that we've received their ballot and put it through the normal process on election day, which for most people who don't know, and I've heard this concern quite a few times with how ballots are processed on election day when they're remote. And it's just like you're there, but there's a pair of election workers to make sure that they're watching each other and make sure it's done cleanly and no one's looking at your ballot. And they go to the check-in table just like you would. They check in for you, so that you're then marked off in the book so that no one else can come in and say, oh, I'm this person. And then they go to the checkout and they check you out to make sure to show that it has gone, both sides been done. Now it goes right into the machine and gets read just like everything else. And I know a lot of people have concern that, oh, what if it doesn't get checked in? And with the early ballots, the other method, it checks you in and out before it even gets to the polls. When we print out the lists, it already says on there that, this person's already voted because they requested an early ballot. And
Well,
it has
now, if, let's say, for instance, you just had a thought. What happens if the majority? Well, okay, so what I think I think I understood. So the question's kind of moot. The idea is kind of moot. So what you're saying is that no longer will they be counted ahead of time. They'll be counted on the day of
so
the
they
election.
so under the current rules, they were never counted ahead of time.
Oh,
There's actually more of a push to try and make it so that they can be counted ahead of time, but without the results being able to be revealed.
okay, until election day.
Yeah, so the same way that on election day,
Some people know the results, though. See, so there's always going to be a little question there.
so the way that it has always worked and is currently working is that your ballot is received by us after you've requested it, and we've sent it to you, and you've sent it back. It's received by us. We then keep it locked up until the day of the election, and it has to be put into the machine and go through that whole process while the polls are open. So we can't start feeding them in before the polls open. We can't keep going when the polls are closed. So we need to get it all done right in the middle of the day. One of the methods that's been discussed to try to decrease the workload on election day is to have a machine designated to take in those ballots over the course of, let's say, the couple weeks that they're available. What that would then do is allow for everything to be put into that machine and not printed or recorded yet. Well, recorded but not printed. And then on election day, once the polls close, we would be able to print out that receipt, like the tapes that you see when you go and report on election night.
Okay, so do you think it's a good idea for other states to adopt this, or have some of them already done that? Or
many states have adopted the mail-in ballots pretty widespread. Massachusetts is just trying to modernize our mail-in system a little bit, because before we had a very small minority of our voters that did vote by mail. But now, with the risks that come with going to the physical polling location, we're seeing significantly more people who are interested in trying to vote by mail. And we're seeing all of the issues that come up when you're putting so much extra weight on that part of the system.
and there are people who are totally against it, and I think that maybe rightly so in other states.
Quite possibly, depending on how their system of it works. I mean, in Massachusetts, we have a very clear system with a clear audit trail behind our paper ballots. And we have a challenge system that if someone is, the election process is completely open and must be maintained in an open setting. It means observers are allowed to attend. If somebody wanted to watch to make sure that, people had filled in their envelopes correctly, they could do so, or that everything was confirmed. If they wanted to challenge that they don't think that that signature was actually that of the voter, then that could be addressed as well. There's fail-safes in place to ensure that we can catch anything that might be fishy.
Well, another thing too, and I don't know if it's Massachusetts only, how many other states do this, but in Massachusetts, you have precincts. Maybe they call them something else in the city.
So Massachusetts,
everybody is broken up into those residential districts. So you have people who know who you are sitting there checking off your name. So it's a very fail-safe kind of a way of doing it. Your name is there, it's checked off, people know you, and if you try to pull the wool over their eyes, I think somebody would find out. Would there be any other way that they check in elsewhere in other states that would lead to some sort of fraud?
So the way that the system works in Massachusetts, and as far as I know, in every other state that has physical polling locations, requires them to come in and they physically check in with someone, again, in a precinct, in some sort of designated district. When you get into larger cities and towns, sometimes you'll see where they have wards and precincts within those wards, but you still have a precinct, and there's required amounts of staffing per precinct. So you're always going to see those people at that desk waiting to check you in. That, yeah, they're going to, a lot of them, especially in towns like Hopkinton, where everyone tends to really know everyone else at some point or another at some level, they're going to notice if you're not who you say you are. And again, if an observer was there and they heard you say a name that wasn't yours, they could then, just out of the blue, they could be standing right there and say, I challenge it.
I love doing that at the bank, turning to the person waiting in line next to me and calling them a different name. Just one of my little pet fun tricks, just to help the day go along. And, I have to, we rushed right into this and did not say that, welcome to Hopkinton Town Clerk, Connor Degan. Were you the youngest ever?
What was that?
Were you the youngest clerk ever elected? Or you just wanted to hear me say
never,
that?
Because I don't know how old some of the clerks way back in the old days were. I'm probably one of the youngest in at least recent history. At the time, I think I was, because I was elected at 23. So I don't know if anyone's beaten me at this point. Someone might have out in a different part of the state that I just haven't met them yet.
Have you been challenged yet in an election?
Only the first one. So I have not had a challenge at a re-election yet.
I don't want to ask who that was. You haven't come up for re-election yet?
No, I have. So I was just re-elected last year in May.
Unopposed.
Unopposed, yeah.
Well, can you really count that as as a victory?
So,
I'm only kidding.
No, so actually what I looked at for it, because I was unopposed, the key for me was how many people voted for me when they could have just left it blank and voted for the things they care about. Because some people will come in and they'll vote for just a specific office and that's all they're interested in doing.
Mm-hmm.
And they might look and say, oh, all these are uncontested, I'm not going to vote for it. So I really was looking to see how many blanks versus how many people voted versus how many total voters, to see how many people said, I'm going to stop on Connor and still give him a vote, because I think that is the closest I can get to a reflection on how people think I'm doing in my role.
And
I actually did quite well with it. I think, if I recall, I was actually the highest single vote getter. There was a lot, but there were a few candidates that, it was choose two. So it was, varying on that, but I got quite a few votes and quite not many blanks. I was actually really thrilled and quite honored that people felt that they should stop and give a vote to me. So it was actually really, really great to see that.
Well, you've done a great job. And I'm not proposing somebody vote for you rather than someone else, but if I had to, maybe I would, But I think that the public perceives that you're doing a great job in your role
Robert. I
as
appreciate
town clerk in Hopkinton. I believe that you've articulated how the system does not lend itself to fraud in Hopkinton and in Massachusetts. So people should be, wouldn't you say, maybe I'll let you express how people should feel about this.
I think that at the end of the day, people should remember that I and the election workers who you see all the time when you go to the polls, and Lynn, my assistant town clerk, we're the ones who are ensuring that everything is done properly with your vote. If you put your faith in us, we'll do everything we can to ensure that it goes exactly as it should. And the only key is then make sure you get it in time. because the biggest issue that we run into is that people try to mail it out last minute, and then the post office doesn't get it to us in time.
So how many days ahead of time? Now, let's say it's stamped before the election
So the current rules
and
in
you
the
get it
law
a day later.
the law is that it needs to be received before the polls close.
So what are you thinking? Maybe 3 days ahead of time, the way things are?
I would say always go as far in advance as you can if possible. If you're going to be doing it within a week of the election, then we have a locked drop box right at the front of town hall, and you're going to be putting it in a sealed envelope anyway, the same as it would be for mailing it. So you're better off if it's within a week, or if you're just not 100% sure the post office will get it there in time, just go ahead and put it in that box. And that way you can save yourself the stamp. And I know a lot of other clerk's offices are doing that as well. So that, that can be for even people who are voting in other towns. It's
And that drop box is as you face the entrance to town hall. It's on the right, is it not?
Yep. And then, but also the other option is that if you can't get up that staircase, there is another locked drop box at the back door at the base of that ramp at town hall. So if the stairs are a challenge and you still want to drop it off, then there is the ramp there.
I want to make sure I get this right. There's only like 4 steps in front, right?
It's only 3 steps, but
3 steps. Okay.
yeah. But someone might be in a wheelchair or anything like that, then they might have a challenge with it. Or
always thinking, Connor. Ladies and gentlemen, Connor Degan, Hopkinton Town Clerk. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Robert. It was a blast, as always.
I appreciate it. Thank you.